This is Mrs. Zappia with Lesson 16, the most famous ratio of all. Student outcomes for this lesson. Students develop the definition of a circle using diameter and radius. Students know that the distance around a circle is called the circumference and discover that the ratio of the circumference to the diameter of a circle is a special number called pi, written with a symbol. Students know the formula for the circumference c of a circle of the diameter d and radius r. They use the scale models to derive these formulas. Students used 22/7 and 3.14 as estimates for pi and informally show that pi is slightly greater than 3. Pause the video and copy the essential question. How do I find the circumference of a circle? Let's go through some vocabulary. A circle is the set of all points the same distance from C in a plane, where r is greater than 0, and r stands for the radius. The radius is the length of any segment whose endpoints are the center of the circle and a point that lies on the circle. The diameter is the length of a segment that passes through the center of a circle, whose endpoints lie on the circle. So the radius goes halfway across the circle, and the diameter goes all the way across the circle. The circumference is the distance around a circle. This is called the perimeter when referring to polygons. And we have pi. This is a ratio, a comparison, of the circumference to the diameter. The symbol is here. Commonly used estimates for pi are 22/7 as a fraction or 3.14 as a decimal. And finally, a semicircle, and this will be half a circle. We'll continue on page 122. The ratio of the circumference to its diameter is always the same for any circle. The value of this ratio, the circumference over the diameter, is called the number pi and is represented by a symbol. Since the circumference is a little greater than 3 times the diameter, okay, let's take a look at that. The circumference is a little greater than 3 times the diameter. So here's the diameter of the circle. And if we start here and wrap that around the circle, that would take us to approximately here. Then we take another diameter, a second diameter, and we continue wrapping it around the circle, and it would take me to about there. And then I need another diameter. I need a third diameter. A third diameter would take me to about there. So it takes 3 diameters to make a whole circle. And then you think, well, what about this little spot right here that is unaccounted for? Well, it takes a little more than 3. You see this little extra part right here. So the circumference is a little greater than 3 times the diameter. And pi is a number that is a little greater than 3. We use that symbol to represent the special number. It's non-terminating and non-repeating decimal, and mathematicians use the symbol or approximate representations as more convenient ways to represent pi. So the symbol pi looks like that, and then when you want a number to represent it, we use approximately 3.14. It's 3 and a little bit more. And then if you wanted to write it as a fraction, you would use 22/7. The ratio of the circumference to the diameter and pi to 1 are equal. So what that means is that pi over 1 is equivalent to the circumference compared to the diameter. Also, we know that the circumference of a circle can be written as pi times the diameter. In our example, the following circles are not drawn to scale. Find the circumference of each circle. Recall that the circumference is the distance around the circle. We'll use 22/7 as an approximation for pi in this first problem, and we're going to do the first circle on the left. To find the circumference, there are several steps to follow. The first one is to write the formula. The formula, right up here, circumference is equal to diameter times pi. The second step is to label the measurement. So on our circle, we know that the distance going all the way across is 21, and you need to articulate if that is the radius or the diameter. The distance going all the way across is the diameter. Next, let's substitute our measurements. So we're looking for the circumference, and we know that the diameter is 21. 21 times pi will give us the circumference. Next, determine what to use for pi. As we saw in the previous example, sometimes you'll use 3.14, sometimes you'll use 22/7, and sometimes you'll leave the pi symbol in the problem. In this case, we're using 22/7. So we are going to substitute the pi symbol for 22/7. Then calculate and round your answer if you're asked to. So we have 21 over 1 times 22 over 7. Remember to simplify. These have a common factor of 7. 7 goes into 21 3 times and into itself once. Multiply your numerators, so we've got 66, and your denominators, 1. That gives us a circumference of 66. Our unit of measure is centimeters. So the distance around this circle is 66 centimeters. We're going to continue with problem B. The radius of a paper plate is 11.7 centimeters. Find the circumference to the nearest tenth. Use 3.14 as an approximation for pi. Let's follow our steps. First, we'll write the formula. The formula is diameter times pi. And I just want to stop and think about this problem. It tells us the radius of the paper plate. So I'm going to sketch this and label that. 11.7 is the radius. Next, I want to substitute my measurements. Notice that the formula uses the diameter, but our problem is given in terms of the radius. So what we want to do is find out what is the diameter for this circle. If the radius is 11.7, and then this is also a radius of 11.7, then that would give us a whole diameter of 11.7 times 2. And that's going to give us 23.4 for the diameter. So our diameter is 23.4. Next, what to use for pi? This is to use 3.14. So we have 23.4 times 3.14. Multiply your answer, or multiply your factors to get your answer. That gives us 73.476. Now this said to round to the nearest tenth. So our hundredths makes the decision. That's enough to round up, so we add 1 to the tenths. The circumference for this circle is 73.5. Our unit of measure is centimeters. Next. The radius of the paper plate is 11.7 centimeters. So we have the same exact paper plate. Find the circumference to the nearest hundredth. And this time we're going to use the pi button on your calculator as an approximation for pi. Step 1, write the formula. Circumference equals diameter times pi. Label your measurements. So we know that our diameter is 23.4. We determined that on the previous page. Substitute your measurements. So we have 23.4 times pi. What to use for pi? This one says to use the pi button. Next, we're going to calculate that and round our answer. You can see on the calculator, the pi button is right around here. Sorry for the very blurry copy there, but there you'll find your pi button. So you enter 23.4 pi button, and then your answer, we get 73.51326 ... and it says to round it to the nearest hundredth. So the nearest hundredth is the 1. The next number over in the thousandth position makes the decision whether to round up or not. 3 is not enough to round up, so our answer is 73.51. Our unit of measure is centimeters. Then notice that this is the same paper plate that we were working with on the previous page, and our answer is 73.51. On the previous page, our answer was 73.5, I believe. Let's go back and double check that. Yes, 73.5. So I just wanted to look at the difference between the numbers. Notice that it's off just a little bit, and that's because of the decimals. When you are using the pi button instead of 3.14 or instead of 22/7, those are approximations of pi. It is not exactly pi. Let's continue with problem D. The radius of the paper plate is 11.7. Find the circumference in terms of pi. So again, we have the same exact paper plate, but we're looking for our answer in terms of pi. When we're looking at the directions for finding the circumference, notice that we have followed the same directions for all of them. The one thing that is different is when it says what to use for pi. So if you're thinking, why do we keep doing the same paper plate? Notice that what we are using for pi has been changing. All right, so back to our paper plate. We start with our formula. If you haven't memorized it yet, you probably will have it memorized by the time we're done with the lesson. The circumference is equal to diameter times pi. We know that this is the radius, and we know that our diameter is 23.4. So we're going to substitute 23.4 for the diameter. Then we determine what to use for pi. It says to use pi. Well, that means you're done. Number E, or letter E. A circle has a radius of r centimeters and a circumference of c centimeters. Write a formula that expresses the value of c in terms of r and pi. So the formula that we've been using is diameter times pi. So this is writing the circumference in terms of diameter and pi. And this problem says to use radius and pi. So one of the things that you might think of is that you just change this to the radius. Well, that's not exactly right, but it's close. Remember that the diameter goes all the way across the circle, but in order to use the radius, you would need to use 2 radii to equal the diameter. So when you replace the diameter, you have to replace it with 2 radii and then multiply it by pi. Now, the correct form when you have numbers, symbols, and variables in an equation is to first put the coefficient, and then to put the symbol, and finally the variable. So this would be the correct form for the answer in terms of the radius and pi. Circumference equals 2 pi r. Question F. The figure below is in the shape of a semicircle. A semicircle is an arc that is half a circle. Find the perimeter of the shape. One of the things that you want to be aware of is that this arc is half the circle. So you can use the circumference formula, but you don't want all of it, you only want half of it. Additionally, you will need the diameter because you are finding the perimeter of that whole figure. So you want to know how many meters all the way around, like that. So we have the long segment going across, which is called the diameter. And we also have the arc going over it. So we need both of those parts. This is the diameter, and this is half the circumference. The diameter is just a given number of 8. The circumference is 1/2 times the diameter times pi. So we've got the diameter of 8, and we have 1/2 times the diameter, and it says to use 3.14 for pi. So we multiply these together, and that gives us 12.56. That 12.56 is how many meters around the arc. We need this 8 for the diameter as well, so we add that together. And so we have 8 plus 12.56 for a total perimeter of 20.56. And our unit of measure is meters. In this lesson, you have learned the vocabulary associated with circles, what pi represents, how to estimate the circumference of a circle, how to find the circumference of a circle, and how to find the perimeter of a semicircle. Since the circumference is equal to diameter times pi, and pi is approximately 3, a good way to estimate the circumference of a circle is diameter times 3. And that concludes our lesson.